Let's take a moment and thank our sponsor, Text Control. There's always something new from Text Control. As a developer, do you need to integrate PDF generation, document editing, or electronic signatures into your ASP.NET Core or Angular applications? Or maybe you want to learn more about the differences between electronic and digital signatures. Text Control is offering a free consulting service to educate you about digital document processing and how Text Control products can help you add these features to your applications. You just go to textcontrol.com/contact and you can request your free personal consultation. How cool is that? Textcontrol.com/contact and you can request a free personal consultation from our friends at Text Control. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Tsavo Knott. He's the co-founder and CEO of Pieces.App. How are you, sir?
Hey, thanks, Scott. Doing good. Happy to be on here.
So when I discovered Pieces.App, and that's actually the website, if you go to http Pieces.App, there's Pieces for developers, which is what I'm interested in. It's code snippets, it's screenshots, it's workflow context. It seemed initially for me kind of indefinable. I'm like, what is this thing trying to be? And then I realized that it is helping me redefine what it means to be not achieving work, but in the process of doing work. It's work in progress. I feel like that's something that isn't expressed enough. I guess I'm maybe having trouble to explain it, but help me understand what that means, that work in progress journey, because I find that so interesting.
Yeah, we say that a lot, specifically because there's the nitty gritty of a developer's workflow that oftentimes gets overlooked, but actually creates a lot of productivity bottlenecks, day in, day out. And when we talk about the nitty gritty, we're talking about, the 50 tabs that you have open at the end of day when you have a long research sprint, right? Or, when you're doing code reviews and you've got multiple projects open in your IDE and you're jumping around. And of course, the ongoing stream of messages in like GChats, Teams, Slack, etc. Right? So there's a lot of things that are going on, and those things have really, really valuable context that help you, not only save things for later, but also pick up where you left off, kind of move a bit faster. And they always joke like our job as developers is to half remember something and look up the rest, right? And so, the most important thing there is that you have a place to look things up. But to have that place, you need to save things there, or it needs to save things for you. And it needs to capture the full context of like the when, the where, and the why. And so, that's really what we're talking about when we kind of break down that work in progress journey, statement there. And yeah, I mean, we're working hard to capture that work in progress and make sure it's available wherever you are in your workflow as a developer.
Yeah, that is so much better said than I was trying to say, because we have like IDEs, you have Visual Studio, you have Writer, you have VS Code, you have Vim, whatever, but none of them seem to acknowledge the 50 tabs, right? These exist. There's 50 tabs, there's notes, I've got literally a whole monitor here with sticky notes. I've got random, make sure to do this .text on my desktop. None of that's acknowledged by these IDEs.
Well, yeah. And, I think, what you see is like the IDEs do a really, really great job for one particular pillar of a developer's workflow. But, we talked about those two other pillars and the interplay between all three pillars, right? Your collaborative space, your research space, like the browser, and your editing space, like the IDE, that's actually got a lot of really, great details and workflow context of, hey, what was I just doing in the browser? Now, what am I doing in the IDE? And how is that informing the conversations that are going on in that collaborative environment? So for us, we just wanted to say, let's not go deep within one particular pillar. Let's go horizontal to capture that full context. And that's exactly what Pieces is. It's a tool between tools. It's not only a great place for you to put important materials and it, captures that context, but it's also a great place for you to find them later, interact with them through a copilot. And notably, it can also do this proactively for you. So it will pick up on your patterns, what you're reading, how's it related to what you're doing in the IDE, how's it related to who you're talking to in that collaborative space, and it'll go ahead and save them as ghost assets for you. And so that's the other thing is that developers don't realize they should have, saved something or organized something until they realize that they need it. And at that point in time, it's too late. And so you're going back to square one and you're looking it up and you're you're getting trapped into that, 50% of my time is looking things up, right? And so we're trying to solve that. And it's not necessarily like at the level of the project where you commit something at large, and maybe that's at the hour or at the end of the day or whatever. It's like literally like switching between tabs, right? Literally iterating on, hey, is this recursive? Should this be a iterative, loop or implementation or whatever else? And you're like, that was a great iterative implementation. It's now dead code. I want to maybe put that somewhere. I'm going to go with the recursive one. So like just little tiny exchanges like that. That's what we're trying to capture.
I really like that term workflow context and the idea that there are these pillars. The browser, it's understood. We get that. Like your collaborative tools, we get that. And you're not trying to replace any one of those. A tool between tools is very clever because we as developers are left to hold all of that in our brains. We're effectively our own clipboard. And how often have you like solved a problem and then just declared tab bankruptcy? You're like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to close them all.
Yeah, force quit. That's what I like to call it. It's workflow force quit, and that's another thing too, right? And that's just indicating, hey, this is such a large problem that it drives people to kind of rage quit the process. And then they got to spend the next day booting back up, right? And that's a whole nother chunk of time getting back into flow. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're focused on.
Yeah, I've spent so much time also going through my browser history. Like, I know that I saw that tab and that thing before. So we try to solve these with OneNote and Notion and Evernote and looking up Teams messages, and that doesn't scale.
That's right. And, if you kind of take a different look at that type of problem, like how do you get back to where something came from, right? You're going to remember one point of context. And so for us is like, capture 10 points of context, right? And then enable you to go from the single point that you do remember, that 1% of a memory, and then get back to, the fuller context. So for us, it's like, hey, you might remember that documentation link was related to this type of code. So you go to Pieces, you search by code, boom, there's your related links, boom, now you're back at that documentation. Or you're like, hey, this conversation, I remember we were talking about this, but I can't remember where it is in Teams. So I look up that topic in Pieces, boom, there's the message link from when, it was saved from Teams into Pieces or, auto-saved, and there you are, back in the conversation context. So, if you think about like modeling that after the brain, the brain looks up memories based on, one point of context. What did it smell like? What did it look like? What were the sounds? And then that, basically recalls that memory and now you're in the full memory itself. Same goes for Pieces, right? So that's why we focus on context so much.
This is so cool. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this because I've got like snippet managers and I've got note-taking apps and I don't have a way to search them all. And I feel like this psychic weight of this stuff presses on me. And I don't know where it's supposed to exist. So I didn't realize that I wanted a tool between tools.
That's right. And let's just say the problem is becoming exacerbated by the increases in volume of material and the velocity of that material being generated through all of these new generative first workflows. And so, that problem introduces a secondary problem for developers. Sure, you're moving faster, but now you've got to connect more dots. You've got to backtrack more often. You've got to kind of operate at a level higher than what you were previously operating at. And, capturing all of that as well, you kind of have the two types of individuals, the people that are proactive and take all types of notes and save and organize and invest in that work that's required to save you time in the future. And the other type that's like, hey, I'll deal with it later. I'm just going to move fast and just dump. But Pieces, the third component is, can we do this for people? Can we identify what is important, when to save something? Can we deprecate non-important things over time? And that's that proactive tool. That's like, hey, helping you along, capturing the important notes of that work in progress journey.
You bring up a really interesting point that there are people that I admire who take notes. And I think to myself, I wish I were like that. I wish I were a better, quote unquote, better person. Because if I were a better person, I'd take more notes. And I feel like I don't have the willpower. My brain doesn't work that way. You're trying to remove some of that pressure from me and equalize things. And you'll take notes for me.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And of course, you have the note itself, but again, circling back to that context, people take notes, but then also too, like the verbosity required to take notes with all the context is like you're an expert note taker, right? So even that is like, hey, we can improve that a lot. a lot better, a lot more.
Now, I noticed that Microsoft and SourceGraph and all these different folks out there are throwing Copilot at everything. And then, of course, folks know that in my day job, I do work at Microsoft, so I interact a lot with GitHub Copilot. But I've been reading the blog post, and there's like Office Copilot or M360. Everyone's got a Copilot. Yours isn't like that. You're trying to be, again, a horizontal. You've rotated the whole thing. It's not a vertical Copilot. It's a horizontal one.
We wanted to go horizontal because context is king when it comes to optimizing the fidelity of Copilot responses. And so, if you look at a Copilot and you say, hey, I'm new to this project, who should I talk to about onboarding, right? The Copilot needs to understand what was going on in that collaborative pillar, like Teams or GChat or Slack. And then the next one is, what was I doing yesterday? Like, what was notable about my research sprint? Well, capturing the context of what was happening in the browser, the things you looked at, et cetera. That's really important. And then the last one is like, of course, you're generating all types of code. You're doing code reviews, all the materials that you're interacting with in IDE. We want our Copilot to say, how do we connect that pillar in the IDE to the browser pillar, to the collaborative pillar, and really capture across the board. And so when you take that and you have it captured, you have it saved, now you can use that to ground the model, if you will, and basically interact with your workflow in a conversational format, of course.
Hey friends, I wanted to turn you on to a particular thing that I'm passionate about. It's the Meadow IoT platform from Wilderness Labs. In fact, I'm so passionate about it, I personally invested in this startup. This is a really great company that's mission is building and maintaining hardware that is as fast and easy as web apps or mobile apps. This is an embedded device OS that includes a premium .NET experience. We're talking about .NET on microcontrollers. And with Meadow.cloud, you just drop in a client library, you get secure over-the-air updates, crash reporting logs, all the kind of stuff you'd want when you're creating an IoT project that has to talk to an enterprise back end. It's the only IoT device platform that offers modern .NET applications on embedded microcontrollers. These are .NET apps at full native speed with native just-in-time compilation. They're called Wilderness Labs. It's the Meadow platform with enterprise data integrations with things like Meadow Cloud. It's fantastic stuff. Check it out at wildernesslabs.co. Now, is it fair to call you a startup?
Yeah, we're a super startup for sure, getting after it.
Okay. The reason I ask is that I feel like a lot of startups right now are, for lack of a better word, abusing or leaning on just OpenAI and ChatGPT-4 too much. And they're just kind of just yeeting tons of context off into the cloud somewhere to let something chew on it. But it took my attention. I was like, wait a second. Throughout all of your material, through all of your blogs, you're calling out offline mode. Why?
Yeah. So two things. Number one is like, a startup getting into teams and enterprise situations and also dealing with like sensitive developer materials that might encompass a lot of IP. You're going to get the challenges there, right? And so the best way to kind of navigate that, at least for us, has been, hey, do the entire demo offline, right? And that's kind of like a really big feeling to say, oh my gosh, I can use a Copilot. This thing understands all my materials. It organizes them, it captures them, and I can turn it, online, offline, whichever kind of version I want to use. But there to note, the Copilots also need to move fast. And I don't think that you should throw a large language model at everything, right? I think that you should use traditional algorithms in your data orchestration layer to aggregate, or kind of compact that context before it even goes into the Copilot. And you need a lot of data points to do that intelligently, right? And so like the why, the when, the where, in addition to the material itself, you want that to just get nice and tight and compact, and then you send it into the language model. And so the second thing there is, of course, we're constrained by device hardware. So we can only run, maybe a 7 billion parameter, maybe a 70 billion, whatever it is. But that means that we need to do an A+ job at that context setting level, that data orchestration level, and lean on the other traditional algorithms that are not deprecated and they do their job very well before it even goes into a lighter weight large language model running on device.
So I want to paraphrase a little bit because I want to make sure that people understand. This is something that I'm very passionate about. I feel like people are sending all this stuff off into these massive models, GPT-3.5 Turbo, GPT-4. And it's great that those models have the sum total of human knowledge and that they can generate a limerick about your code. I don't want Pieces.App to generate a limerick about my code. I don't need that part. I don't need it to write a poem, right? So you have local runtimes, Code Llama, Llama 2, that are optimized for conversations about code, not, taco recipes and, Shakespearean, whatever, because it's not necessary. Now they're big, but they still run on device. So this means I could use this potentially like on an airplane.
Oh yeah. Wi-Fi off, completely air gapped. It's going to, satisfy any security or privacy concerns that you may have. But yeah, it's also offline, right? And the other thing there is you want to move fast. So if you have to say, hey, look, how do we make this thing as fast as possible? Encountering a network delay is just an inherent, 100 milliseconds that you're going to have to increase. And the other thing is this, each model can be tuned obviously for a specific task, but you don't need a big model for everything. And so, we have other models, we call them kind of micro models, if you will, that do things like embed things for search or tag things, title things, whatever else, that are chained with these other larger language models to format in a way that's conversational or things of that nature. So it's all about the right tool for the job, I would say. And yeah, yeeting big models at small problems that could be optimized in clever ways is just not the name of the game for us.
Yeah. And I just think that's unexpected. So I think, my opinion is kudos, because I've been like pounding on that drum, like, hey, everybody, ChatGPT-4 is overkill. You're going to waste resources. It's not necessary. Local models. And to your point just now, multiple local models. I always joke about how you don't need hot dog or not a hot dog, and then send it to OpenAI. A little local model can do that. We have the power,
And they can do it very fast, I would say. So like when you save something to Pieces, it enriches, it gives you related links, it gives you tags, titles, descriptions, even related people, all types of stuff. It does this in like 100 milliseconds, right? From that small model. That's fine-tuned. We dynamically inject embedding layers to kind of guide it in the pipeline, if you will. And yeah, it's super fast, right? So if you want to improve those times, because developers care about speed, then yeah, don't take a power drill to something that you can just use, or a jackhammer to something you could just use with a power drill, right? It's like, again, right tool for the job.
Okay, so then I can imagine myself using this on like a laptop, but then now I have a team of 10 or 15. How is that interacting? Because parts of Pieces can be air gapped and local, but now I want to collaborate with like related people and folks that are in similar work that I'm in.
Yeah, so this one's pretty interesting, actually. And I will note one of our enterprise pilots right now is actually a bank, and they have to have end-to-end air gapped, but they want to do this collaborative stuff. And so you'll note if you install Pieces, the way that we do inter-application communication is Pieces just runs a local host. It's got HTTP, it's got gRPC, and it can, create that communication pipeline. So the second component is that, hey, if you want to show search results from Mark, or you want to show, Copilot kind of interactions that are representative of a team's materials, not just yours, then you can actually do kind of LAN-based peer-to-peer, retrieval. And that's kind of, again, if you're in the same building on the same network, I can go out, I can look, at other people's instances, pull it just in time, and then forget about it later. And then building up from that, you can actually do this online, even if you're not on the same network, because you can proxy your local host out to the web. And so you can do retrieval like that. And so it's kind of decentralized retrieval when it comes to a team setting. But yeah, that's kind of our initial approach there is, building up from the local and then incrementally opting into cloud, if you will.
This is a kind of a random aside, but I would wonder if you've thought about looking at Tailscale networking, and if you could layer Tailscale on this, which already has enterprise login tools, you could put everyone on Pieces on the same Tailscale meshed VPN, and that would solve a lot of your traversal issues.
That is I'm glad we haven't committed too much code to that. We're in the research problem right now, but that is a very good pointed piece of advice there. So we will check that out. Yeah.
I'll talk to you about that offline, because that's freaking amazing, and it'll solve all those issues. And then basically Pieces runs on its own back plane from a networking perspective. And then you can focus on what you need to focus on, which is getting me the collaboration tools that I want. One of the things that I wanted to call out, which I thought was cool, was not only is your docs great, and I really am always like, I go to a website, it's marketing, and then I'm like, all right, let's look at the docs. There's a ton of great docs here. You have so many plugins and extensions. That really, for me, cemented we're going horizontal. Rather than trying to make the app the ultimate app, everywhere I am, you're there. You have an add-on for Edge. You have a plugin for Jupyter Labs. You've got like freaking 10 plugins.
Yeah. Actually, ironically, a user told us yesterday that our VS Code plugin works no problem in Azure Data Studio. So I was like, hey, team, let's verify that. And we're going to have a branded, documented Azure Data Studio plugin like in the next 48 hours.
Yeah,
and I'm like, yeah,
based on code extensions. Yeah. And of course, you call out Chrome extensions and Edge add-ons because a user may not know that they're based on the same tech.
Yeah, that's right. And I will say this, it has been another really interesting thing for us to also go cross-platform. So Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. You see a lot of these tools out there at the startup stage that do it for one platform, but then they get to another platform and they're like, hey, look, the way that we architected this is going to have to be, we're going to have to yeet dollars and team members at it and figure that out. So we started in the hardest constraint situation, and then we've solved those hardest problems, and now we're expanding super fast. And one of the reasons that it is easy to add plugins is we generate all of our SDKs off open API specs. And then, that local host server, you can have an intern build a plugin in like a day or two. So, we do have this vision that we build plugins, but beyond that, we're excited to open up the SDKs for others to build whatever they could imagine on Pieces OS.
Well, and it seems like you've built everything on kind of open standards. Like HTTP is really at the core of it. Like even how your GitHub gist integration works is just like, okay, everything is an artifact and everything has a URL, and that's how we can go back and forth between importing a gist into Pieces or sending a piece into a gist.
Yeah, and we have to lean on those open standards to go truly horizontal. I would say that there is a lot you can do at the custom level, but I think that as soon as you start to deviate from the standard, introduce exceptions to how you build things, like you're going to add a log function to your scalability every time you do that. And so, we try and stay super standard.
Yeah. One thing I saw a couple days ago when I was playing with it was this OCR. People keep sharing code. I hate this. They share code screenshots on Twitter. They're not accessible, and there's no way for me to go and get that text out of that image without OCRing it myself.
So and actually to note on that, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's Google Lens, or I have OCR built into Windows or Mac OS or whatever. But I will say this, OCR in the traditional sense is actually not fine-tuned for developer materials like code snippets or things like that. And you have all these special characters like colons, semicolons, brackets, parentheses, all these crazy characters that OCR even today is not very good at. So we chain OCR with another micro model that was trained to repair broken OCR code. So not only are you going to get, multimodal, hey, I'm going from an image to a text, but it's going to be high fidelity, right? And so like that was another little nuance there, just a little detail that makes it a bit better. We got that whole process down to about 50 milliseconds on a screenshot. And now in about a week, we are doing code from video. So basically for the context, you're like, hey, go watch this YouTube tutorial, pull out the transcript, pull out the code snippets, whatever else, and then have a conversation with it, or save the video link, discover snippets from the video, good to go. So that's how you build up from a small building block, subproblem like OCR, making it A+, getting it down on the execution time. And then now you can do this for many frames in a big video. And I'll say this, building on that, the last thing is going truly horizontal. If you can do this offline frame by frame, and you can now also segment app UIs, then that means that we can really gain a lot of context without needing the integrations. So we can do a lot of basically horizontal work at the OS level, and then tenfold that context with an integration. So I think like that is a big win on the vision processing side of things for us.
That's really cool. So we've got everyone excited about AI. They're off running. Microsoft's off and running. Google's off and running. What does it feel like to have these giant AI kind of like behemoths making chatbots while you're a startup? And is that a good thing, or is that an uncomfortable feeling?
For us, that's the known. We knew that if you have an environment with unlimited server compute, resources, whatever else, of course you can solve that problem. So 3 years ago, when we approached AI as being a core component of our product, we said, let's start on device. Let's start atomic. Let's start, speedy and private and fast. And so, what we're seeing is it's extremely easy for us to build up from the small and get into the known solutions, right? But on the other side of that is it's much harder for big companies to figure out, okay, how do we now take this, distill it, deploy it, get it out there, etc. We even just made a PR to Onyx Runtime the other day because they just didn't have what we needed. And we're like, hey, we need to improve this. And so, yeah, we submitted a PR for that because we're just, again, exploring a frontier that is kind of overlooked.
How do you think people will use something like this within the context of what they might already have? Like they might have GitHub Copilot chat in their VS Code instance. How are they going to move between the different Copilots? And is it a competition or are they augmenting each other?
I think that there's going to be a future where copilots have incredibly high interop, right? And I think that if you are fine-tuning copilots for certain tasks, but then you look at, all right, we have all these copilots, we need them to play well together. That's going to be a natural progression. So we are looking at, hey, how do we be truly interoperative for copilots designed to go deep in the IDE, for copilots designed to go deep in the browser, et cetera? Even in a place like Teams, right? It's like, we want to be super interop with 365 Copilot. And so, yeah, I think that you'll see us lean into that heavy.
Okay, so it's not one Copilot to rule them all. It's a bunch of task-specific Copilots that are doing what we need to do.
Yep, absolutely. I will say this as well, just to add to that point. If you look at where we sit, we're kind of a level above writing code and code completion. And I think that capturing the who, the when, the resources, the other parts of your workflow, and surfacing those to a user, you'll see us come out very quickly in Q4 with the kind of holy grail experience, which is install this thing, turn it on, and now you just have a continuous feed of your material, your resources, everything you need just surfaced to you. So you don't even have to ask it a question. It's like, hey, we know you just switched from the browser to the IDE, and you just looked at all these things specific to what you're about to do. Boom, now in your IDE, it's that level higher, all the resources re-ranked just in time for your work. So that's really key.
That is a really great point. And that's a really great point to hit because I'm realizing that with something like GitHub Copilot Chat, which I use every day, it can see today, as of the time of this recording, the tabs that I have open, meaning the couple of tabs I have in VS Code. It doesn't know what's going on in my browser. It doesn't know what notes I've saved. It's not a snippet manager. So you are actually a layer above and horizontal, which means if I ask you to explain some code and I ask Copilot to explain some code, you have more context by definition.
And that's why I call it, the context wars, if you will, right? Everyone's trying to optimize the context, improve retrieval augmented generation, make the best orchestration layer, etc. But at the end of the day, being as horizontal as possible and being really smart about what to capture from those horizontal pillars, that's going to be, the defining factor for us, where you're going to get responses from our Copilot that you're just not going to get out of an in-IDE Copilot.
Yeah. And then, of course, not being able to have the option with local models to, like I say, run on airplane mode, or I assume it's going to help you in Europe in places that are going to be less likely to want their code pushed around the earth.
That's exactly right. This bank that we're onboarding as of last week is actually in Europe. So, they are about as strict and regulated as you could imagine.
Yeah, I worked in banking for 7 years, retail online banking, and they do not mess around. They very much want the world. And the idea, okay, no one can talk to anyone. Everyone's in their own cubicle. Everyone's in airplane mode, but I still want collaboration. Sounds like a typical bank ask.
It's classic, yeah. But we were prepared for that. We knew code was sensitive, and so we started from, again, that most constrained problem, right?
So folks can go and install this. What? You have Windows, you have Mac. What do I need? Does this run on any operating system?
Yeah, Windows, Mac OS, Linux. Linux, we have Flatpak and Snapcraft. Mac OS, we have Apple Silica, Intel, if you're on the older ones, and Windows, pretty awesome.
Okay. Is it going to auto-update itself? And is there a free trial? I want to understand what we're getting into.
Yeah, so right now it's completely free. So we are actually, again, as a startup, navigating that monetization bridge where you go from a PLG, product-led growth motion, you make sure you hit product market fit, and you say, what are the plans, right? The willing to pay features. So in Q4, we have Pro Plus Cloud, Teams, and Enterprise that are all going out, and those are going to be new features. not even, features that you can use today, which is quite extensive to say the least.
That's cool. One of the things that I was mentioning to a friend of mine yesterday was I was wondering if we're going to see co-pilots turn into like the streaming wars, where it's like you pay $7 for Netflix and $7 for Peacock and $7 for Hulu, and how that's going to end up feeling, because I enjoy all of those services and I'm happy to pay, but there will be a lot of them.
That's right. And as you mentioned, it's expensive. It takes a lot of compute. There's going to be even more data going through them. And so if you think like, hey, I'm generating more, now I'm saving more content, now we got to improve the big model in the cloud or the retrieval part, I think it's going to be all types of like unknown things that we'll slip into that turn out problematic. But for us, margins are low because we're like, hey, use this thing offline. It's optimized for that. Use it quickly, privately, securely, and we're not paying the cent out to OpenAI or whatever.
Yeah. And speaking of problematic, I assume you have a responsible AI plan and you're focused on, ethical AI. I'm curious, how do you keep the chatbot and the AI focused on what it needs to be focused on, which is code, and not, random therapy chat?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So that's kind of where it comes down to prompt engineering and fine tuning. So, if you basically optimize your model to really only understand, one type of thing, and if it receives another type of thing, it's going to be like, this is junk. It's going to give you a really bad output. I think that for us, we're looking at, hey, kind of chain of thought reasoning, prompt engineering, and doing the safety on that side of things. But also too, if your model is inherently focused in how it's trained or fine-tuned, it's going to output stuff that's easily detectable as junk. And so, that's our plan of action for the local models, right? And I think that the main thing is, don't send anything up to the cloud, especially proactive features that are working behind the scenes for you. I think that that's like, again, one of the harder problems to solve. But once you knock that out, it builds the highest level of trust. And that's where we've been focusing.
That's cool. I'm glad that you're going to focus on that as well. So thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks, Scott. I know we talked about a lot of things, but yeah, awesome.
Well, this is pretty cool. It's Pieces.App. That's the website, Pieces.App. It is an intelligent interactive hub for small developer materials. It's a tool between the tools. So be sure to check that out. And this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.